world, my name is Claire Sullivan. I'm 34, a travel photographer based in San Diego, though my heart is more often in the air than on the ground. I live out of a suitcase, and my life is a mosaic of foreign streets, strangers' smiles, and golden hour landscapes. People romanticize it. But between the flights, the edits, and the silence of hotel rooms, it can feel untethered. Like you're always one step away from something real. 3 weeks ago, I posted a photo on Instagram. It was of a small, ivy-covered bookstore in Doolin, Ireland. The caption read, "Sometimes, the smallest places hold the biggest stories." I didn't expect the comment. Just 2 words, from a verified profile I hadn't seen in years, still beautiful. I clicked the name, Ethan Blake. The photo was a black and white portrait, serious, thoughtful. The bio said, author. Story collector. Escape artist. And then it hit me like the sudden memory of a dream, Ethan. From high school. The boy who sat in the back of Mrs. Keller's English class with his oversized sweaters and eyes that never quite met mine. He was the one who played Angels by Robbie Williams at prom. Quietly. Just before I left early with my then boyfriend, unaware someone had asked the DJ to dedicate it to me. I don't know why it hit me so hard. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe I was just tired of airports and pretending I wasn't lonely. Maybe it was the way he wrote still. Like he'd always thought it. Like he'd always been watching from somewhere far. So I replied. Didn't expect to find an angel here. It was impulsive. A joke, a nod to the song. But Ethan replied almost instantly, "Sometimes they find you." Even after all this time. Since then, we've been talking. Long messages, deep and slow, like conversations at midnight. He lives in a tiny village in the Scottish Highlands now. Doesn't use social media much. He writes fiction that sounds like poetry and walks his dog along cliffs. He told me that when he saw my photo, it felt like a sign. Like the line from the song, "And through it all, she offers me protection, a lot of love and affection, whether I'm right or wrong." I don't believe in fate. But I believe in moments. And something about that one, it felt like a door opening. Or maybe a map being drawn. That's why I booked a ticket to Edinburgh yesterday. I'm going to meet him. Not because I expect anything. But because some stories don't wait. And maybe, just maybe, this one's been waiting for me all along. Venture the plane landed under a thick veil of clouds, the kind that makes everything feel like a movie scene. I stepped off with my heart caught somewhere between my throat and my ribs. Scotland smelled like moss, like mist and earth and something older than time. A perfect place for secrets to hide. Ethan was waiting just outside customs. Tall, lean, a little more weathered than I remembered. But those eyes, still the same. Quiet storms. "Claire," he said, almost whispering. We didn't hug. Not right away. We just stood there, looking at each other like we were both trying to solve a puzzle we hadn't realized we'd been carrying. He drove us north in an old Land Rover, windows slightly cracked, classic rock humming low on the radio. And then, as we passed through the outskirts of Edinburgh, it happened. Angels started playing. We both froze. I turned my head slowly. He didn't look at me. Just said, "I didn't plan that." Neither did I. We arrived at a cottage nestled between 2 hills, overlooking the sea. It was the kind of place you'd write novels in. Or maybe hide from the world. Ethan showed me to the guest room, brewed tea, and we spent the evening by the fire. Talking. Tentatively at first. Then with more courage. Like peeling back years of silence. He told me about his books. About how he writes for the people he couldn't save. And about losing his mother 3 years ago. That's when he moved here. To remember. To heal. I told him about the cities. The awards. The loneliness. "I follow your work," he said quietly. "Always have." That night, as I lay in bed, I heard the sea and thought of his words. Of how he'd said the photo felt like a sign. I thought about the line from the song again, "I feel that love is dead." I'm loving angels instead. Anne wondered if maybe he had felt like that once. Maybe we both had. The next morning, we walked along the cliffs. His dog, a scruffy terrier named Wallace, chased gulls and barked at the wind. Ethan pointed out old lighthouses and shipwreck stories, talking more than he had the night before. I used to think I was writing fiction, he said. But lately, it feels like I'm trying to rewrite reality. Like if I tell the story right, something broken might heal. I looked at him. And is it working? He smiled, barely. I think you'll have to be the judge of that. Later that day, we stopped at a local inn. The owner, an elderly woman named Moira, seemed to know Ethan well. She called me his American muse, with a wink that made me blush. We had lunch near a firelit hearth and listened to Moira recount tales of the sea. That evening, back at the cottage, I found an old notebook tucked under the guest bed. It was filled with Ethan's handwriting. Stories. Unfinished. Some lines crossed out. Some circled. But one page caught my eye. It read, "If I ever see her again, I'll tell her the song was hers. Always. Not just that night. Every night since." I closed the notebook gently, my heart thundering. I knew then this wasn't just a reunion. It was a reckoning. And somewhere inside me, something began to shift. Maybe this wasn't just a visit. Maybe it was the beginning of a story I had been waiting my whole life to tell. The next few days unfolded like chapters in a novel neither of us had written yet. Mornings began with tea on the porch, wrapped in wool blankets, as gulls cried above and Wallace dozed at our feet. Afternoons were for walks, some silent, some full of questions we'd never dared to ask when we were teenagers. But it wasn't all soft light and shared memories. The past, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of clawing back. It started with a phone call. I was in the kitchen, slicing bread, when I heard Ethan's voice shift. Stiffen. He ended the call quickly and offered no explanation. That night, he was distant. Distracted. And when I asked, he brushed it off. Just something from the publisher, he said. They want me to come back to London. Will you? I don't know yet. But there was more. I could feel it. Later, in the village pub, we ran into someone from Ethan's past. A woman named Eliza. Striking. Confident. Familiar. The way she looked at Ethan made my stomach knot. So, the mysterious American finally arrives, she said, lips curled in a not-quite smile. He's talked about you, you know. The one that got away. Ethan tensed beside me. I forced a polite laugh. You must be Eliza, I said. The one who stayed. We left shortly after. The silence in the car was thicker than the fog outside. Back at the cottage, I couldn't hold it in. What was that about? He sighed, rubbing his hands over his face. We were together. Briefly. After I moved here. It didn't work. Because of me? He looked at me then, a storm in his gaze. Because I never stopped thinking about you. I didn't know what to say. The truth? I hadn't stopped thinking about him either. The next day, we had our first real fight. It started with a question, one I hadn't meant to ask. Why didn't you ever reach out before? After high school? After prom? He stared out at the sea. Because you were always moving. Always somewhere brighter. I didn't think I could be enough. That cracked something in me. Because deep down, I had believed the same. That he was the one rooted and I was the one drifting, never still long enough to be loved properly. That night, we didn't talk. I sat on the edge of my bed, rereading his notebook. One passage stood out, she made the world louder, but in a good way. Like music through headphones. Like our angels in a quiet gymnasium. Music. Always the thread. The next morning, I walked alone to the cliffs. Wallace followed, tail wagging, as if he knew something needed mending. The sky was overcast, the sea wild. I sat on the edge and let the wind tangle my hair. Ethan found me there. Without a word, he sat beside me. I'm scared, he said finally. That this is too late. That we missed our chance. I took his hand. Maybe. Or maybe this is exactly when it was meant to happen. We didn't kiss. Not yet. But the silence between us changed. Became something sacred. Something waiting. That night, we built a fire. Drank wine. And played music. Not just Robbie this time, but the whole soundtrack of our youth. He sang along, low and rough, and I realized I had never heard his voice like that before. When Angels came on again, we didn't speak. We just sat together, letting it play out in full. And when it ended, he whispered, I loved you then. I love you now. I just didn't know how to tell you. I turned to him, heart pounding. Tell me now. And tomorrow. And the day after that. And finally, we kissed. Soft. Certain. As if time had just been a long hallway leading us back to this moment. But every love story needs a test. And ours wasn't over yet. The ordeal the days that followed were a dance between vulnerability and silence. Ethan and I had shared a kiss, yes, but with it came an unspoken question, what now? Love declared was one thing. Love lived, another entirely. One rainy afternoon, Ethan received another call. This time, I could hear the urgency even from across the room. He stepped outside to take it, and when he came back, his expression had changed. It's my father, he said. He had a fall. They need me in London. Go, I said instinctively. Of course. But I didn't expect him to say, come with me. The journey to London was a blur. Trains and stations and whispered reassurances. At the hospital, I stayed in the background, watching Ethan slip into another version of himself, a son, responsible and composed. But I could see the cracks. That night, in a small hotel room near Paddington, I reached for him. And for the first time, he pulled away. I can't lose focus now, he said. Not with everything happening. You're not alone, I whispered. But he turned his back to me. The next day, I wandered the city alone. London was a swirl of umbrellas and honking cabs, so different from the quiet cliffs. I found myself outside a record store, drawn in by the sound of Angels playing inside. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. I went in. I bought the single. A vinyl. I don't even own a player. But I needed to hold the music, somehow. When I returned to the hotel, Ethan was gone. A note on the pillow, had to think. Don't wait. I'm sorry. My heart sank. But I didn't cry. Not then. I went back to Scotland. Alone. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. I stopped checking my phone. I took long walks with Wallace and let the sea speak instead. And somewhere in the stillness, I started to understand. Love isn't just presence. It's choice. Over and over again. One morning, I found another letter. Slipped through the mail slot. The envelope smelled like rain and old paper. It was from Ethan. Asterisk, I broke because I'm scared of hope. Of what it means to want something so badly again. But when I heard Angels today, playing from an old radio in the hospital lobby, I thought of you. Of how, through it all, you offer me protection even when I run. Especially when I run. I want to come home. If you'll have me. I read it twice. 3 times. And then I packed my bag. He wasn't at the cottage. But there, in the garden, was the record player I didn't know he had. The vinyl I'd bought was spinning. And then he walked out from behind the stone wall, muddy boots and all, looking like a man who'd walked miles to find the right words. You stayed, he said. I always did. You just didn't see it. He nodded, walking closer. This time, I see everything. We held each other for a long time. And when the song ended, we started again. Not perfect. Not certain. But together. Through it all. The return spring arrived softly in the highlands. Buds peeked through frosted branches. The sea turned a gentler shade of blue. Life crept back into the landscape, like a whispered promise. Ethan stayed. More than that, he began again. He returned to writing, this time at the small wooden table near the garden where the sun hits just right in the late afternoon. He wrote stories about loss and light and the strange beauty of being found. I photographed the village in bloom, helped Moira at the inn, and mailed prints to magazines back in the States. But for once, I wasn't running. One morning, Ethan brought me coffee in bed and sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at me like I was a riddle he'd finally solved. "I've been thinking," he said. "We've lived so long in our own chapters. Maybe it's time we write one together." He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a ring. It was a plane ticket. To Doolin, Ireland. 1 year since your photo, he said. The one that brought us back. We went. The bookstore was still there, ivy thicker than before. Inside, it smelled like old wood and second chances. We left a note on the back of a map tucked into a travel journal. Sometimes the smallest places hold the biggest stories. We spent the week tracing the threads of who we were and who we'd become. Back in Scotland, we hosted Moira's birthday at the cottage. She wore red lipstick and flirted shamelessly with the mailman. Wallace barked every time someone clapped. Ethan played Angels on the record player, and people danced. Really danced. Later that night, just the two of us, we sat beneath a sky smeared with stars. "I used to think angels were metaphors," Ethan said. "For hope, or grace, or something out of reach." I looked at him. And now? He took my hand. Now I think they're people. The ones who show up. Who stay. Who fight for the story even when the ending isn't clear. I didn't need a proposal. I didn't need promises carved in stone. I had something better, a love that had been tested, unraveled, and rewoven with care. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for the next flight out. I was already home. Through it all.
The end.